to another episode of Palisade Radio. I'm your host, Karema Mutlu. And on today's show, we have Tony Barresi, who is the Vice President of Exploration at Triumph Gold here in Jekyll Island. How are you today, Tony?
Great. Jekyll Island's an amazing place, and I'm so happy to be here for an interview.
Let's begin by talking about what you guys did in 2018. You just did a presentation earlier today which talked about all the great results you had. So can you give us a brief overview of that?
Sure, yeah. So we did have fantastic results in 2018. For a Greenfields exploration project, we made one of the best intersections in the world in 2018, intersecting a previously unknown porphyry system on our property. That's the highest grade porphyry system in all of Yukon. We hypothesized that a system like that was present on the property, and we used a number of different tools to vector in on it, and we found it. And now that we've intersected it with 8 holes, we know what we're doing for 2019, and that's going to be continuing to explore and grow the size of this very rich porphyry.
Let's step back a bit and let's talk about the Yukon area in general. I understand it's very well known for discovering porphyry deposits. Can you talk about this?
Yeah, so actually, the most well-known porphyry system in Yukon is Casino. And it's a monster. It's a really large porphyry, but fairly low grade, much lower grade than the intersections that we've made of this new porphyry system. Casino is not yet a mine. It's likely to be one of Yukon's next mines. But if Casino was located where we're located, it would be a mine today. And that's because we're on a road and they're way far away from a road. So one of the prerequisites for porphyry systems is to have shallow level intrusions. There's not a lot of shallow level intrusions in Yukon, but we have a specific geological environment on our property that allowed for an intrusion to come to a very shallow level. And that's why we hypothesized that there was likely a porphyry here. And we tested that and found it.
Fantastic. Let's move on to talk about the infrastructure of the Yukon. I understand that it is continually improving, and because of that, it's far easier to get to and find much bigger deposits. Is that true?
Well, you know, the Yukon everybody knows there's a lot of metal in the Yukon. You know, the Klondike Gold Rush is one of the most well-known mining events in the mining and exploration and discovery events in the world. And so there's also a big limiting factor in the Yukon, and that's the general perception that there's a lack of infrastructure. And compared to a lot of places in North America, there is a general lack of infrastructure. Infrastructure in Yukon is improving. What we really have going for us on the Free Gold Mountain property is that we already have infrastructure. So what limits most exploration projects in Yukon doesn't limit us. So an example of this is what our cost per meter of drilling is. A typical project in Yukon, all in, will have a cost of drilling somewhere between $400 and $500 a meter. We're drilling at about $250 a meter. So we get incredible bang for our buck with a drill program, and that's because we have a road right onto our property and right up to the areas that we're exploring. And that same infrastructure would also make it much easier to go into a development stage. Now, we're not the only ones that are going to have infrastructure or are going to have infrastructure. The Yukon government and the federal government have committed a large sum of money to improving infrastructure. And so there's 3 roads that are going to be built pretty much entirely for the sake of resource development in Yukon. And this just goes to show the commitment that the government has towards our sector and what a positive environment it is for mining up there. You know, it's not just funding from the government and building of infrastructure that makes it such a good jurisdiction, though. We're working in an area where The First Nations groups have settled land claims, so we know where we stand with the First Nation groups and their governments, and we have great relationships with them. The communities that surround our project are so pro-mining. The Geological Survey of the Yukon made a geological map of our area a year after we reinitiated exploration on the property. And so we have a tremendous amount of support from all fronts working in the Yukon.
Let's move on to the gold and silver sector in general. What are your current thoughts on the price action, say, for the last few years? Are we back in a bull market for gold, in your opinion?
You know, I try not to speculate about that kind of stuff, partly because I just don't even believe the other people that speculate about it. But as an exploration geologist, my real goal is to find something that is going to be economic at the current price or less. I'm not looking for something that might be economic down the road. I'm looking for something that's economic right now. And that's what I think that we've found. You know, the big intersection we made this past year, it's about 320 meters of 1.1 grams gold, almost 0.3% copper. And that had a really high grade included interval, about 75 meters of 2.5 grams gold and over 0.3% copper. And, you know, if we can prove up a body of mineralization that has that grade, it doesn't matter what the price of gold is. We're going to be bought out, or someone's going to be mining that thing. That's what I care about.
Excellent. Okay, you spoke earlier today at Jekyll Island. Can you give us a brief overview of what you talked about in terms of your presentation for investors out there?
Sure. You know, the subject of my presentation is, well, first of all, just acquainting people with the project and with the success that we've had. But it's really geared towards informing investors about the incredible upside that we have. So we intersected the Yukon's highest grade porphyry. And in and of itself, that's quite an achievement. But we've been data mining on this property for 3 years now, and we have a really robust understanding of the geology surrounding this porphyry mineralization that we found. And we believe that it's geologically mandated that this high-grade domain is attached to an enormous and deep porphyry system. So we're looking at something that's probably over 600 meters deep, but it likely has a strike extent of about 6 kilometers. And we know that for a variety of different reasons, but one of the most compelling reasons is that we have a 6-kilometer long in situ hydrothermal system with a massive soil and geophysical anomaly associated with it. And the size of that hydrothermal system is more than double the size of the one over Cascabel, which also has a blind buried intrusion, and it's almost the size of the one at Oyu Tolgoi, which also has blind buried intrusions. We know that there has to be a blind buried intrusion here. We have an IP survey that shows that there's an incredible amount of metal surrounding it, and it has never been tested by drilling. So this year, we're going to drill the deepest holes that have ever been drilled in Yukon into what we already know is the Yukon's highest grade porphyry. And we're going to define this thing over kilometers. And that's the big upside. And that's what I was trying to get across to investors here at Jekyll Island.
As we begin to wrap up the show, Tony, is there anything else you'd like to share with us today, or anything else you learned here at Jekyll Island during the conference?
Oh, it's a great conference. There's incredible speakers here talking about the upsides in a bunch of different industries, especially in the resource sector. And it was just a real pleasure to be able to participate with such a high caliber of presenters.
Great. Thank you very much, Tony. I'm sure we'll speak again in the future.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity.
think you understand the junior mining sector and you think that the participants in the mining sector, junior mining sector, are good people and kind people, hit the bid.
How violent that term could be, it actually could be quite violent. It could be a rip-your-face-off uranium rally.
And the world is always going to need raw materials. It's going to need copper and gold and nickel and so forth.
Totally destabilized. Hey, troll.